Well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of my actions. What a mess I've created for myself. And one of the things I've learned is that when you are working on a truck and you have an empty bed, it becomes a dumpster. And the first thing we need to do on tonight's episode of Cody Builds, we need to empty this dumpster out so we can take a look at how we are going to fix a major design flaw, in my opinion, that Ford had with these Dentside truck beds. So let's get to work. Let's get this cleaned out. Let's get this episode going. Oh, that looks so much better. Got this pretty well cleaned out. Only exception, I left some of the tailgate trim up there, a little bit of that hardware. I did go ahead and pull out the two patches that were in here. Now, I don't know if my grandfather did these patches or if these were patches that were done by the body man who owned this truck before my grandfather. But I mean, they were really crudely done. They were patches that were set over the top and just really the lightest of light tacks every so often. And then like seam sealer put around the outside edge of the patches. So they're really crudely done. I went ahead and I blew all the rust and stuff out of our cross member. The good news is that all looks pretty solid actually, even though underneath the patches is pretty badly rusted. Everything else looks pretty good. The next thing I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and get the tailgate out of the way. And the tailgate on these Dentsides isn't as simple as modern tailgates. The hinges are captured, so it's not as easy as taking apart the hinge and rotating this thing, pulling it out. We actually have to remove the bolts that hold the hinge in on either side. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get the tailgate out of the way. And then let's take a look at how we're going to take 4 inches out of the back of this bed. Okay. Now I believe this one was missing the bottom. Yeah, this guy was missing the bottom bolt on that side. So now I'm just going to go ahead and undo my hinges on either side here. Let's disconnect it there. Okay. Let this rest right there for a second. Okay. Now, I think I should be able to slide this out of there like that. Okay. All right, the good news here, this is all pretty solid. The one thing I'm noticing is my hinge here for the tailgate is pretty rotted out, so I might have to try and find a new hinge pin. This side's bad. Let's take a look over here. Let's get my hinge out of the way. Oh, where'd it go? I dropped it on the floor. This guy here, it's actually in pretty good shape on this side. So no issues there. So I may just have to replace the one on this side. It's in pretty bad shape. Everything else here looks pretty good, you know. The back corners of the bed here are all solid. Everything here is solid. So let's take a look and figure out how we're going to shorten this thing down. My initial thought was, you know, in the front, we took it apart in such a way that I didn't have to have a welded seam across the bed. That's not really going to be an option back here for a couple reasons. One, we already know we're going to have to patch these sections in. So no matter what I do here, I'm going to have to patch replace some of this bed floor. Same for over here. If I get a line that comes through this section, it really doesn't make a difference because I'm going to have to be patching these sections anyways. We're only talking about adding a little weld along here and a weld along over there along up the side. Not quite the same situation as the front where I can keep from having a weld line across the bed. If we were wanting to do that, we were going to have to disassemble this back cross member, the back corners of the bed off of the quarters, and it's just going to get kind of ugly, I think. There's a lot tied into this structure in the back corner of the bed. So I'm just going to take a look here, see what I think is going to be the best course of action, and then we'll talk it through. All right, I've been crawling around underneath this bed, and there's some unique problems that I'm going to run into trying to bob 4 inches off the back of this bed. Nothing that we can't overcome, but it's not going to be quite as clean as the front where the weld lines are right up in the very front corner. I'm not really going to be able to do that in the back. It's just easier if I bring you up under the truck and show you why that is. So let's come on under the truck here. So what you'll notice, this is the back of the truck here. We've got a large cross member back here and then a support structure for the bed here. What we did at the back of the bed is, sorry, at the very front of the bed, is we removed that back panel and then we went ahead and removed all of the spot welds for the bottom cross member, dropped that out, and then we took, basically our 16 inches starting from there moving forward. The problem with doing that back here is there's a lot more structure back here than just this cross member. You've got all of the side braces up the side of the bed there. And then if we crawl under here, let me grab the flashlight, and we look up the side of the bed here, you'll see there are tabs for spot welds all up here that go all the way up inside the bed, between the bedside and the internal structure of the bed. All of those spot welds would have to be drilled out, and those are going to be a major pain to get at. Those would be easier to do if we were removing the side panels, but we're not going to do that. So that kind of nixes actually removing this structure and taking the 4 inches directly off the back, which means I think our best option here is going to be to take the 4 inches from between these two cross members. So I have never seen this done. I haven't seen any YouTube videos of it. Maybe they're out there. Maybe you guys have done this before, but so I'm kind of flying in the dark on this. I'm going to figure this out for myself here, but I think the best option for me is to take the 4 inches from between these two cross members. The only other issue that presents is now these corner braces, like the one that I made last week. That 4 inches I take out is going to fall right where those corner braces land in the bottom of the quarter panel. So I'm just going to have to drill out the spot welds here, separate that patch. Now the good news is on this side, let me turn my flashlight around here, where I did our new repair last week, it's not welded in yet. So I don't have to worry about that. Won't have an issue there, but we are going to be cutting this brand new sheet metal that we just put in. I kind of knew that already, not a big deal. I think that's going to be the best course of action for this bed. And up on the top side, what that's going to look like is, the back of that cross member falls about here. You can see this other cross member through the holes in the floor here. So that 4 inches is going to come right out of here. You follow that line up the side of the bed, and we're not having any changes in the in the contours of the bed like we did at the front, where I had to kind of get creative and cut and weld things and move things around. We're just going to have 4 inches taken out of there, bring the panels together. All these seams should line right back up, so no problems there. And then as far as the bed floor, all this is going to have to be patched anyways, like I said earlier. So when we cut this apart, we'll weld the outside quarters and the inside panels back together. And then before I start welding all this in, we'll go ahead and we will cut out the rest of the rot here, and we'll patch that all in and then weld everything up all at once. So that's kind of the game plan. I think it's going to improve the overall look of this truck. As I've said before, I really just don't care for all that tail on the back of these short beds. I think when you look at the bed as a whole and you see how long this is in comparison to how long the front of the bed is, it just doesn't look right proportionally to me. So this is going to bring that proportion down a little bit. Not a ton, just a little bit. Maybe 4 inches is not enough. Maybe I should have done, 14 out of the front and 6 out of the back, but this is all kind of a new thing. I've not seen it done before. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and get everything marked up. The other thing to note is the affected area in this part of the bed is probably going to be somewhere within this light housing. Also not a big deal, because ultimately this is kind of rotted a little bit here. When we weld everything back together, what I'll do is before I cut this apart, I'll measure the opening here, and then I'll just be sure to extend that light opening further forward into the bed so that we can just replace like for like on the light there. And it'll fit inside the trim and everything will be just fine as far as that goes. The trim's already going to have to be shortened anyways, so as long as we're keeping the relationship between the light and the back of the trim here the same, it doesn't really matter where that starts as long as I extend the hole forward as far as it needs to be extended, and then that back piece of the trim will fit there just fine. So I think that's going to work. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start measuring everything out, lay it all out. I probably won't have time tonight to start cutting, but that means we will be prepared to cut this thing up the next time we're out here in the garage. So let me get after measuring things up, laying some tape out, and giving you a real good visual representation of exactly the work that's going to go into the back half of this bed. Okay, you can see I've got the inside marked up here, and that's pretty straightforward on this one. What I decided to go with was basically 12 inches off the back of the bed to our farther cut line, and then 4 inches back from that cut line. Actually, it's going to be just slightly less than 4. I want to give myself a little bit extra to potentially overlap and cut when I reassemble the bed. So 12 to here, and it ended up being, a little bit more, just slightly more than 3 3/4 for this gap. What I need to do is carry these lines up and over the bed. So for this, we're gonna do the similar to how I did the front of the bed. We're gonna kind of make a makeshift plumb bob and lay down this bed. We're gonna make sure the bed rails are all level on each side. And then we will do a makeshift plumb bob over the top of this bed rail, and we'll mark the sides. We'll tape all that up, and then that'll basically be it. The next time we're out here, we'll be able to cut this thing down. The nice part about this was I was able to get just behind where my seam sealer was on this patch. By cutting this just behind that, that's gonna be the start of this patch, right? So I'm not adding any extra weld lines. If I had gone on the other side, I'd had to bring the patch back behind where I cut. So I did that kind of strategically, where I'll have one solid weld line all the way through here until I get to this patch, and then we'll have a little section added in there. This patch will actually, when I cut this section out, I'll then cut up here over as high up as I'm going to cut, and then back down. We'll weld this patch in, and then we'll weld up this seam when it all comes back together. So yeah, I did that kind of strategically. That's how I ended up laying that out. And it ends up being a few inches away from the edge of this lower cross member here, and a little bit further than that from the back cross member in the back. So we're basically taking 4 inches right out of the middle of that section there. All right, I'm going to use my square to carry my marks up to the top side of the bed here. Okay, I'm just gonna do a quick measurement on this. There should be that slightly more than 3 3/4, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I was expecting. Okay, so now I've got my marks here that we're gonna carry all the way down the side of the truck. One thing, I'm gonna have to go ahead and get this light taken out, so let's do that next. And I'm really just cutting all the wiring off for all this stuff. We're gonna rewire the entire truck. None of this wiring's any good. It had old house wire. I mean, pretty much anything you could find, wiring everything up. Romex, all kinds of junk. So we're just gonna cut that. And all of this is going to get rewired. So one thing I'm noticing here is where my lines are going to fall. It's actually going to lay pretty nicely. I think my 4 inches is going to fall somewhere in here. And what that's going to allow me to do is take this cut off, cut out this section of where this light was, and then re-weld that back into this body seam in this body line. The nice part about that is the cut line doesn't fall through kind of the middle of these contours or anything. It's actually going to capture this pretty nicely. So I'll be able to actually mimic the original opening even after this section is cut out. Okay, so if you didn't catch this in my short bed conversion video, all I've got here is a piece of braided fishing line and a really heavy nut tied on the end of it. And this is essentially going to be our plumb bob. So I'm going to slide this over my straight edge here. And I've got a loop in there, and I'm going to loop this around. Probably going to go around there twice, just so that holds its spot. You just want to make sure that the fishing line is running off of the edge that you want to mark. So we wouldn't want this wrapped the other way, because I'm trying to mark the inside edge of this straight edge. The other important factor is to make sure that the bed's level. So I'm going to grab a level real quick. It's pretty close. I may have to jack the front up just a touch. All right, now that I've got the plumb bob set up, I've got it where I want it, I've got the bed leveled. This will allow me to mark a perfectly straight plumb line down the side of the truck. So I can get my first reference marks marked out using this plumb bob. And then I can do the other thing on the other side, and we'll be able to tape this side up and know exactly where we need to cut to get nice vertical lines down the side of the truck. Now, where the line is away from the side of the bed, we can take our square here, put it up against the bed, and we're just going to bring it over until it just touches our plumb line. And it's got a little bit of movement in it, so we have to let it settle. Okay, so there we're just touching the plumb line, so I can mark the inside edge of that line. And we'll do that in a couple spots here on the side of the bed. Okay, now I should be able to come in here with a piece of tape and work up my reference lines, and it'll give me a nice straight line, and then I can measure off of that. I can either run the plumb line down this side and do the exact same thing, or I can just take a direct measurement off of my tape line to make my reference marks. Either one will work. There's no right or wrong answer. I'll probably measure this down and then make direct measurements off of that tape line in order to figure out where my further back cut line is going to be. So the other thing I'm doing here is my tape line. The reason I put the tape on the inside of my cut line, like where this is going to be, like the tape's going to fall on the cutoff side, is that when I peel this off, because I've got so much flaking clear, flaking paint and everything off, there's a good chance that if I had put this on the other side and I pull this tape off, it's going to take a whole lot of paint and everything with it. So I'm just avoiding that by putting this on the cutoff side Just something you might want to consider if you're worried about the tape taking any paint off. Working on a patina vehicle, or you know you've got bad paint adhesion. Okay, now I'm just going to confirm my measurements. Yeah, that looks really good. Really good. Yeah, we're really good, nice and straight. All right, so now all I need to do is repeat this on the other side, and we're pretty much prepped and ready to cut this thing out. There you have it. Everything's marked out, ready to be cut. So that's outside to outside that tape is our cut line, and that's exactly what we're going to take off. We're going to chop that out. We're going to take this section, weld it back on. It's going to take 4 inches out of the back of this truck. Man, I'll tell you what, this stuff, you know, this is only going to be one video here, but this took me almost 3 hours to measure everything up, tape it all out, do it nicely to a level where I'm comfortable just coming in and cutting right away. It's time consuming. This stuff is time consuming. It takes a good amount of measuring and prep work to make this happen. So just keep that in mind. It's not a quick process. You want to make sure that as you're measuring these things out that, you know, you're double checking your measurements all along the way and that everything looks good so that when you go to cut this up, you don't have any major issues. This one's pretty straightforward. It's straight cut, straight across the bed, much less complicated than the front part of the bed. I think it's gonna look good. I think it's gonna look a whole heck of a lot better in the tail of the section of the bed. And it's gonna be unique. I'm not aware of any other Dentside Fords done this way. They could be out there, but I'm guessing it's very few. So it will be a unique length truck. Same wheelbase as a short bed Dentside Ford, but it will be a unique overall length for the truck. We're also not going to be putting a bumper back on. We're either going to do a roll pan or just leave absolutely nothing on there. So that's going to help shorten up the bed a little bit from the original dimensions as well. So that's pretty much going to do it for tonight, guys. I'm running out of time here. The next time we're out here, we're going to be cutting this down and we're going to start to get it tacked back together. It's going to be the main goal, just like we did on the front. We'll cut it down. We'll get everything kind of tacked back together, fit where it needs to be, get all that fitted up. And we may even start to tackle some of the bed floor patches as well. So that'll be on the next episode. I really appreciate all of you that watch, like the videos, comment on the videos, and I really, really appreciate all of you that are subscribed. As of today, I'm nosing in on just 50 more subscribers to make it to monetization for this channel. That is huge. It's something I didn't think I would accomplish in the first year. I really didn't think I thought it'd be like a year and a half before we made monetization. So I thank you all for all of you that are subscribing, all of you that are watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoy these videos. I hope you're getting something out of them. I hope you're learning stuff. I hope it's inspiring you to work on your projects, because that's the main thing. This is something I'd be doing regardless of whether I was putting it on YouTube. I was just kind of hoping that my work here, what I'm doing every single week, might inspire you to get out and work on your trucks. Other YouTubers did that for me, and I'm hoping that maybe I'm doing that for some of you. So, as always, if you don't work on your project, it will not work on itself. Get out in the garage, get building, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cody Builds.